All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm clearly not Ethan. You just had that Ethan graphic up there. So clearly I'm not Ethan. So all of you that are expecting Ethan are probably like, wow, Ethan looks so different. Ethan is actually doing some amazing stuff right now. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about what he's doing. So I'm going to keep it very like hush hush because I don't know if he wanted people to know. But basically, he's speaking in the mental health space. So he's speaking today and we're always so excited. As you know, Ethan is one of our national advocates here at the International OCD Foundation. What's so amazing about that is he has an opportunity to travel throughout the country, even the world, and speak to people virtually and in person. And so he's speaking right now on OCD and mental health at kind of a conference in front of people. So it's an all-day event. So he asked me to kind of jump in for him. I believe it's going well. He looks like he's having a good time. So we're gonna miss Ethan. I'm going to do my best to fill his shoes. I'm not quite Ethan, so hopefully you won't be too disappointed. But my name is Chris Trondsen. I'm one of the lead advocates here at the International OCD Foundation. I have my own live stream. It's called Chris's Corner. That's every other Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 noon Eastern Time. I am a therapist who also happens to have OCD, so I like to kind of combine both of those worlds and speak from my own personal experience battling severe OCD, which kept me housebound and at the lowest points in my life, all the way full circle to becoming a therapist. So I'm here to answer questions both as a therapist and somebody with lived experience. And I'm stepping in for Ethan today, so it'll be neat to see a different group of people than the crowd I usually get in the morning here on the West Coast. I definitely want to let everybody know that this live stream is going to be all about you. I know it's titled Men's Health. I'm going to give a little bit of men's health statistics, but I also want to talk a little bit about perinatal health, as well as those that are struggling with OCD and related disorders that are non-gender conforming. So I'm just going to do a brief couple statistics at the beginning just to drop a little bit of information and knowledge. But this stream is really about talking to you, the community here at the IOCDF. So please announce yourself. We already have some people announcing themselves. So we have Salvador Alberto, who is from San Mateo, Rizal. I don't know where that San Mateo, Rizal. I'm horrible with geography. So Salvador, please let me know where you're from. It's a little bit embarrassing how I don't know much about geography. And I will say it's because of OCD. My OCD was absolutely severe to the point that I didn't even leave my house. I did not travel, haven't been able to go out of the country. So that's one of my kind of bucket lists and things that I'm doing. So I haven't been able to travel. So I might not know where you're from. But Eric B is from Houston. I do know where Houston, Texas is. So I'm not that naive. But please announce yourself in the chat. We have Seal Beach, California. Oh my goodness. I love Seal Beach. I actually surf. And I always surf out in Seal Beach. Seal Beach is one of my favorite places. I used to live in La Salle and Lakewood and Long Beach. And so I know where Seal Beach. I'm actually in Costa Mesa, Orange County. So shout out to Beach Life here on YouTube, who is in Seal Beach. Love it, Southern California. Hello, Dave. It's good to see you here today as well. Yes, I'm not quite Ethan, Dave, but I'm doing my best to step in and fill in for Ethan. So hopefully I'll do at least 50% as well. We have Meg, who is watching from Boston. I will say that the Boston conference is one of my favorite. You have the most beautiful architecture. We have horrible architecture here in Southern California. It's pretty plain, but every building in Boston, I was in awe. Alexandra, one of my favorite OCD advocates, says hi. Absolutely, really happy to see you. Martin is the one in Seal Beach, so hi. We have Austin, Texas, the claimer. So Austin's beautiful. The conference before the world shut down in 2019 was in Austin, and that was absolutely amazing. It's hot, so good. I don't know how you do it. The humidity killed me, but it was fun. Matt's also from Boston, so really love that. And then Nikki is from Dublin, Ireland, and I would love to go to Ireland. We also have Red Bank, New Jersey in the house. Hi, Jennifer. I haven't been to New Jersey yet, but looks amazing. And then we have another hi. So what I would love for everyone to do is absolutely announce where you are from, as well as, oh, San Mateo is in the Philippines. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I really want to go to the Philippines. The Philippines is one of my favorite, I can't say favorite places because I've never been, but I've always wanted to go. I absolutely love the Filipino culture. I love the Filipino food. So I like sisig. I like lumpia. I know a little bit of Tagalog, so I know how to say my kababayan. So I know a little bit of Tagalog. So anyways, but welcome for the Philippines. And then Jennifer Jordan, hi, good to see everybody. So as you jump in, this conversation is really going to be about everyone here. So I want to answer your questions. I have some pre-submitted questions that I'd like to get to, but I want to hear about your OCD and related questions. Please go ahead and submit those. Like I said earlier, I am a therapist. I've been working in the OCD field for about 11 years. I've run multiple support groups that run weekly as well as monthly. I also see clients on an individual basis and intensive outpatient basis. So I've worked with definitely different severities. So I'm here to answer any of your OCD-based questions. Also, I live with OCD and I had severe obsessive compulsive disorder, the depression that comes with it, the anxiety and panic attacks, and body dysmorphic disorder. So I'm here to answer all your questions. I really want to make this about you. So definitely make sure that you announce yourself and also ask your questions. I would love to make this about you and your questions. Before we jump in questions, though, I do want to make a quick announcement. I'm sure you've heard this before, but this live stream is intended to serve as educational content and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline and should not be used if you are in distress or feel unsafe. If you are in a crisis or you are ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room. Call 911 or call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. We want to create a safe as space as possible. So be kind and respect everyone. With that, this is being broadcast on various social media platforms and is being recorded. So please be mindful of that as you ask personal questions or leave comments. At the end of the day, we are all here to support each other. So I am definitely excited about your questions. So make sure to get those in the chat and I would love to answer those. Absolutely. Stacy asked what the topic is tonight. So usually on my live streams, Chris's Corner, we have a topic and guests around that topic, and we spend about the first half an hour talking about that topic. And then we end up jumping into Q&A. But Ethan told me to just talk about whatever you all want to talk about and ask questions. I will say what at the IOCF, what we're doing with the live streams is, recognizing, like trying to create some more inclusive content, also a content across the different streamers. So one of the things that we talked about this month is it's Men's Mental Health Month. So I'm inclusive, so I want to talk about men's mental health, then I want to talk about some things for women's mental health, and then I want to talk about things of some non-binary. So just some really quick facts to think about. So when we look at men's mental health, we know that some of the major disorders that are affecting men is actually depression is one of the highest. It often goes undiagnosed because in men, often depression comes out as more of like aggression and anger than sadness. And so that can be overlooked, as well as there's high levels of anxiety, bipolar, and there's even 10% of patients with eating disorders are men's. That often goes undiagnosed. We have to make sure that we're looking out for that. There's also suicide is on the rise. So we definitely know that suicide's important. As for the women, there's a conversation that Liz McInville had last week about perinatal OCD. So one thing I want you to all know about perinatal OCD, that is where somebody is pregnant and at either the start of their pregnancy, during, or after, they notice their OCD gets really bad because of the hormonal changes. So we know in OCD, the times or the ranges that most people experience OCD or at least start to have OCD is that prepubescent, like age 8 to about 13 ages. Then the second highest rate we see is after that, about 18 to 21 rather. But the third highest rate we see the onset of OCD is actually in women when they get pregnant. So what I'd love for some people to shout out in the chat is, when did your OCD start? When did you start noticing your signs and symptoms? Did you start to notice it when most people do in that kind of age 8 to 13 range? Did you notice it after high school when there's a lot of changes and transitions in the end of puberty from 18 to 21 or 22? Or are you a woman that when you got pregnant, you noticed that your OCD got worse and then you started having obsessions and fears about, potentially your baby being harmed or anything around your baby, or maybe just the OCD in general got worse? Also, we have to obviously talk about our non-binary individuals with OCD. We know that members of the LGBTQ community often find it difficult to find access to LGBTQ affirming providers. So our LGBTQ SIG is doing a lot of work on that and also addressing things like higher rates of suicide attempts, higher rates of substance abuse in that community. So just wanted to kind of drop a little bit of knowledge just to make sure everybody knows that there's a lot of different communities that are being impacted by OCD and mental health. But I would love to hear from everybody where you are. When did your OCD start? What age were you, and when did you first notice those signs or symptoms? So we already got a few questions, so I'm going to jump right in. So Jennifer, you say that your daughter's 11 and always gets anxious at night when it's time to go to bed, I'm thinking, is what you're saying. Oh, how did you get the question longer than me? Awesome. Okay, my daughter's 11, get anxious at night, doesn't know why, or doesn't know. She picks something to obsess about, whether it's an anxious event that happened in the past or starts asking for things or about things that she knows I'll say no to will cause issues, like, can we get a dog? So here's the thing with OCD. Often individuals will say their OCD gets worse at night, specifically before bed. And the reason for that, Jennifer, and most likely why your daughter at 11 is experiencing that, is because when you have OCD, one of the biggest components of obsessive compulsive disorder that most people don't recognize is the intrusive thoughts. Many people notice those like physical behaviors, the checking, the tapping, things like that. But actually, we notice that the intrusive thoughts is what's constantly with us. Well, when you go down to bed at night, you don't have any distractions. You're not at school, you're not with friends, you're not busy. So there you are laying in your bed with no sound, no TV, nothing. And they're just alone with their thoughts. On top of that, when you're late at night and you're exhausted and tired, you have less energy to fight those intrusive thoughts. And you find yourself getting frustrated trying to wind down, but that's not happening. And so often, what many individuals with OCD will do is they'll actually try to stay up super late to like 2, 3, 4 in the morning until they just pass out and go to bed, because they don't ever have to just lie there and not have any intrusive thoughts that are loud with no distraction. So what I would talk to your daughter about first is ask her that. Does she notice at night that when she's going to bed that she finds that she's just laying there, or maybe some of her dreams also, she has OCD in her dreams? Could it be a fear in a subtype? For instance, does she worry that when she goes to bed, she might die or not wake up, or wake up and her family's gone? So have a conversation. If she's with a therapist, the therapist can do it and ask, like, is part of not sleeping your subtype? If it's not that, are you having dreams about OCD? And that's why you don't want to sleep. But most likely, because this is just what I see the most in my clinical practice, and it was my own personal experience as well, is definitely the fact that when you go down to lay to bed and you have nothing but your mind, those thoughts are just louder and you're tired to fight them. So a couple things that I found help me and what I work on with my clients. So first of all, when you're 11, it might be harder to articulate. So really create a safe space, or the therapist a safe space, to ask what's going on. But if it is about that, what I like to do is, I'm not sure if your therapist has worked with you about writing down, narratives or worry scripts. So pretty much kind of writing out some of your fears, and then have her practice reading those, not right before bed, but maybe a few hours before. So she's addressing those intrusive thoughts. That way, when she goes to bed, often people think they should stop exposures before bed, but you really want to be facing the OCD near bedtime. So by the time you lay there, you've already sort of fought back. And when you're lying there and the intrusive thoughts are coming in, you're able to say, you know what? I've already been beating you earlier. I faced you and I practiced accepting uncertainty, and I feel strong about it. Sometimes writing down some of your worries or your fears might help. And just, I'm too tired right now to deal with this. I'll deal with it in the morning. I found that sleeping with a sound machine really helped. Obviously, it's a Band-Aid, not a fix, but I found that it helped me in the beginning just to have some noise and some music to fall asleep to. So I found myself not just sitting there ruminating on my thoughts. So hopefully some of those will help. Definitely put in the chat if I totally was off base or missed anything. I definitely want to make sure that I address everything you asked. Alexandra asked at 4:07. I'm going to say West Coast time. I'm so sorry, Fran. I'm so bad at 7:07 your time. Maybe I'm not as bad as I thought. Have you noticed that there are any unique barriers men face in receiving or access treatment for OCD? So good question, Alexandra. I'm actually going to have two guests on tomorrow on Chris's Corner. We're going to address this in the first half before we open up for a general Q&A. But yeah, absolutely. I would say that there's so much stigma around men getting mental health treatment. Not that there isn't stigma for everyone. There's definitely stigma for everyone. But still in men, and specifically, I did a talk at the IOCDF conference about additional barriers that men of color face. So some communities, like the Latinx community, the Black community, there's a lot of specific fears around getting help. Like there's a sign of weakness or there's something wrong if you're getting help. So we have to normalize treatment and mental health treatment for men. It can't be something that only the wealthy get or only women get. I mean, it's something that everybody, regardless of your income or your socioeconomic status or your sex or gender, should be able to have access to. So often, like I was saying at the beginning, also sometimes certain disorders show up differently in men than it might in women. So depression, we often think of something that people are really sad and unhappy and crying. For men, it might be a lot more of loss of interest, sometimes substance abuse like alcohol usage, or anger or frustration or irritability. And people don't think of that with depression, but that's often how depression in men can often appear. We also know that they're less likely to open up to a therapist. Most therapists are women. So often men don't feel comfortable opening up to a woman, so they don't go. And they often don't talk to their friends and ask for support. So I always think about it in every group, whether it's women, men, Black, LGBTQ. There's always unique challenges. I wouldn't say any group has it worse, but I don't like to always compare. I like to look at it as there's specific challenges that we as the mental health community have to make sure that we provide the proper access and education and make it more accessible to all different groups. But I work with a lot of male clients. Not only I work with everyone across the gender spectrum, but often for what I've been finding is that men often take less time to open or take longer to open up to someone who ends up getting them into treatment. So we got to make sure. There's also a lot of higher suicide rates. So we definitely, you know, definitely got to look in that. All right. So Stacy Young asked, "Do you at 710? Do you personally know anyone who's gone through deep TMS for OCD? I started treatment last Thursday and I'm feeling miserable. If you know anyone that had it, how did they feel in the beginning and how do they feel now?" So yes, Stacy, I've definitely had clients that have gone through TMS. I would say that majority of my clients that had really good success were those that went through TMS but for depression. So they found that the TMS for depression really helped. You want to make sure there's coils that they use. So you want to make sure that they use the proper coil. So there's a coil for depression, there's a coil for OCD. So for those of those watching, TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's often used for individuals that are just finding that they are not finding success in medications. They've tried SSRIs like Prozac or Paxil. They've tried SNRIs like Pristiq. They may have tried other medications as well, and they're just not finding any relief. So TMS is one of those treatment modalities that is medical based, but is trying to basically work for those individuals that have not found help in medication. I haven't had as many clients try it for OCD. I will say that they definitely said in the beginning that it was because you have that on, and it did create some kind of both physical discomfort in the beginning, and they felt off in the beginning. But I would say stick in there. I know you are committing pretty hardcore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of my clients are going 5 days a week for 30-minute sessions for 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a big commitment. I haven't had anybody at all, and I'm not saying that this means that that doesn't happen, but I haven't had anyone get worse. Everybody has seen either slight relief or a good amount of relief, but I haven't had anyone get worse. The other thing that for everybody out there was a special on Sunday, and there's an article about a new type of TMS that's specifically for depression. It's called SAINT, but they've changed the initials to SNT. It's like a deep TMS, and they found that it's really helping people with treatment-resistant depression. So look out for that. But Stacy, let us know how it's going. Are you feeling any relief in the disorder, or are you finding yourself just kind of miserable? I will say that people often say they have less side effects on TMS than they do traditional medication. So hang in there. I do know that I'm on the OCD Southern California board, and we have a treatment provider from USC who works with TMS and has said that you got to stick in there the whole time to really get the relief. Alexandra says that your OCD started at 6, but pregnancy and post-pregnancy got OCD definitely worse. Yes, I've seen a lot for individuals that get pregnant. They absolutely see the OCD get worse. What I've heard from some clients is that their OCD gets better during the actual pregnancy, but after is when it's really bad. Or sometimes during pregnancy, women have to go off of their medication for it, or individuals that are pregnant have to go off of their medication for OCD, and then it can get worse. So, hang in there. Meg says OCD started in kindergarten, Stacy at 8 or 9, Beach Life at 6. So 26 for Vanilla Cake Boy. Interesting name. We also have the claimer is 15. And Eric says episodes as young as 4, but wasn't diagnosed until 40s. I'm so sorry to hear that, Eric. I know that one of the things that I think the IOCDF is doing really good at is getting enough information out there so that your story is unique. I know that doesn't help you at all, and it didn't help me because I got diagnosed earlier than you, but I suffered for so long before diagnosis. But the more that we kind of look at getting the information out there. I just wrote an article that was in the recent IOCDF newsletter talking about some of the barriers to getting the information out there so people can get quicker treatment and diagnosis. So I just always am happy when I have a kid client that comes into my office because it means that we're doing something right, and younger they're getting diagnosed. So we got to work for that. Andrea says, did not work for my son. Maybe it works for others. I'm not sure if you were talking about TMS or anything else. So definitely put that in the chat. All right. So Meg says, do you have any advice for emetophobia, which is a fear of vomiting? I've gone through exposure therapy at McLean Hospital in Boston, but still struggle on a daily basis when leaving the house. So the first thing I want to do is definitely validate your experience, Meg. I mean, hands down, throwing up is not fun. I would say the only way that you can kind of restructure in your head a little bit is often it makes us feel better when we do it, because usually it means that we're sick or something's going wrong. And when we do it, we feel so much better. But it's definitely a negative experience. So what I tell my clients that have emetophobia is the treatment goal is not to get you to like throwing up or looking forward to it or enjoying it, because nobody has that. Let's normalize that real quick, right? Like nobody has that, definitely outlook on throwing up. Everybody just sort of hates it. We just know that unfortunately our acceptance. So when we talk about treatment for emetophobia, we talk about treatment for OCD, you always hear this word acceptance thrown around. And I think a lot of times people will think, okay, well, I don't want to accept it. I don't like throwing up. Why would I accept throwing up? Acceptance doesn't mean that you enjoy or like something. It means that you have finally taken a passive approach and are no longer going to try to stop something that may be inevitable from happening. So what that means is throwing up doesn't happen as often as OCD and anxiety tells you it's going to happen, but it may be something that occurs throughout your lifespan. So obviously there's some things we can do to prevent it. So, don't eat a bunch of food before a roller coaster, or don't, eat your friend has blue cheese dressing from 2004 and you eat that. I mean, sure, you're going to throw up. But other than that, there's not really anything we can do. And so your job is to do less, is to start letting it go. So what I would do, Meg, is I would start to look at what are certain things that you're doing as compulsions because of the fear of throwing up. So some of the common ones, and you can correct me if you don't have any of these, but people are constantly tracking the expiration date on food. They're always sniffing food and smelling it. They're avoiding certain foods. They're eating less food or eating small bites. They're constantly like checking for feelings or anything like that. They're avoiding any kind of movies or TV shows that might have somebody throwing up in it. They're avoiding going places or being around people because they're worried about them being sick and getting them sick, and then they throw up. So what we have to do there is all of those behaviors, what it's doing to your rational brain is it's telling your brain, hey, Meg is really going to get sick. She's going to throw up. It's terrible. We have to be super cautious. And that's why you're thinking about it every day. And it's such a big issue for you, where all of us don't like throwing up, but it doesn't weigh us as heavy as it does for you. So what you want to do is you want to start kind of looking at those behaviors and starting to reduce those compulsive behaviors, because then you're not reinforcing this idea that throwing up is the worst case in the world. It's almost like getting hit by a car or, falling down a flight of stairs. as you start to slowly, start to eat foods, not checking the date, going out around people, not avoiding people that get sick often, you watch movies and TV shows with throwing up in that, you're going to find yourself getting used to it. You're going to find yourself having fear tolerance that you didn't know you had. And remember, your treatment doesn't end when you like it. You'll never like it, but it's recognizing that inevitably it's going to happen at some point in your life, and you'll be able to get through it, and you'll be on the other side and look back and say it was not as bad as the anxiety made it. The last thing I want to always add is we got to think about our values over fear. Look at what are some of the things that you've had to give up because of the fear of throwing up. What are some of the things that you've let go in your life? What are some of the things that you enjoyed so much at one point that you can't do anymore? And ask yourself, is that more important to you? Do you want to be there for friends or go out or try new things? And if the answer is yes, start small, start pushing back small, but move towards that goal so you could eventually live to the life that you want to live. So hopefully that was helpful, and definitely keep in the chat if there was anything that wasn't. I want to bring up William's comment actually at 7:12. I really like this comment because you said at age 22, it started with HIV related OCD and it transitioned into a rabies fear when you were 27. Sorry, my lighting sometimes makes me look dark. I'm not dark, I swear. I'm not in a cave. But what I wanted to say is the reason I wanted to bring up this comment, Fran, is because this is how OCD works. Don't let OCD fool you. So what I mean by that is OCD started out with a fear of HIV, but transitioned into rabies, but it's really almost the same thing. So I'm not sure if it moved away from HIV because there's treatments for it, so people aren't as worried, or if you did ERP or it just no longer affected you. But that's OCD sneakiness. So everybody who's watching this, definitely recognize that's how OCD gets us. It almost goes home. I have this Halloween analogy. It's kind of like if you were passing out king size candy bars at Halloween, and a kid comes to your house and gets a king size Snicker bar and is like, oh, forget these other houses. This house is the one. They have king size. They might run home and put on a different Halloween costume from last year and come back to ask for more candy because they know you're the house to go to. But you recognize it's the same kid with a different costume. It's the same thing with OCD. Your HIV fears and your rabies fears probably feel so different, but it's the same thing, just a different item to fear about. So I would definitely say that you want to work on not letting it feel like something new. Whatever worked in the fear of HIV is going to work in the fear of rabies. Jennifer, I'm glad that was helpful for your daughter. So keep us in tune and let us know how it goes. Beach Life at 7:13 says, I do that. I stay up very late to the point that I cannot keep my eyelids open, so I fall asleep fast. I don't like being in the dark with nothing to see or hear, then my mind runs wild. Absolutely. I hope the suggestions that I gave to Jennifer helps as well. OCD is difficult. Your thoughts are sort of bombarding you, and when you're laying there late at night and you're tired, in the dark with nothing to distract you, it can be its worst. But the great news about ERP is it's so powerful that you can get to a point where I don't sleep. Well, I do like sleeping with a sound machine, but the purpose now is not simply because being alone in the dark, I need something to distract. I'm able to fall asleep plenty of places, friends' houses and traveling when I don't have a sound machine. So I've learned that at night, OCD is going to show up. It's going to say something, but it's not my job to answer, to freak out, to worry, to think, to engage. It's simply to notice that OCD has something to say, but just like kind of like a loud, noisy neighbor, it's not your job to interact or to talk or to say anything. But definitely try the white noise. The noise machine, Stacy says, that's what I did. And a sleep machine helped me to practice not engaging in thoughts. And then I was able to turn the sound machine quieter and quieter and quieter week after week as part of my exposure therapy to get to a point of no longer needing it. All right, so at 7:14, the claimer asks, I get confused whether it's addressing or analyzing. So what you want to recognize is analyzing is a mental compulsion. Why is it a mental compulsion? Because OCD has offered you something, and analyzing it is saying, okay, I got to figure out what is it trying to do? What is it trying to say? What point is it trying to make? I need answers. I need to figure this out. And whenever you do that, whenever you're really active with the OCD, that's when your brain, so I'll talk about the boring science for half a second. So in our brain, we have something called the limbic system. And we have amygdala, which are about the size of an almond. And when that is triggered, it sends signals to your brain that, hey, I'm in danger, I'm in trouble. So whenever we take a like resistance or conflict or an active approach to our intrusive thoughts, our brain gets put in that fight or flight danger, and we're more likely to give into compulsions. So in this analyzing thoughts, what ends up happening is you are actively trying to figure out, analyzing what's going on. What does it mean? Could I be this? Am I potentially going to harm someone? Did I hit somebody with my car earlier? Whatever it is your intrusive thoughts are around. And then what ends up happening is, you're never getting the answer that's going to shut off your brain, and your brain becomes so active so it becomes worse. Addressing it. So this is an example of addressing it. If I came home and I had the intrusive thought that I hit somebody with my car, analyzing it would be trying to replay and go back and think, okay, when I was at the bank and I drove home, I don't remember anything, but could it have happened? Wait, let me replay it. I think I heard. That's analyzing. Addressing it is saying, I have the intrusive thought that I hit somebody with my car. I may have, or I may have not. If I did hit somebody somebody with my car, it is terrible. And I'll have to face the consequences, and that'll be horrific. And I will address that when they come to me. But I'm letting it go. I'm taking a passive approach. So I'm not going to go to my car and check if there's dents. I'm not going to go back and redrive. I'm not going to watch the local news tonight. I'm just going to sit in that uncertainty that I may or may not have hit someone, and we'll see how I feel about it tomorrow. That's addressing it. You're doing something with it, but you're not trying to figure out and focus on it and analyze it and all of that, which makes it worse. So hopefully that was helpful. Anybody can ask any follow-up questions you have. If I answer, but you feel I missed something, please definitely let me know. Yes, Jennifer, that sound machine for sure. So Vanilla Cake Boy on, I think that's Twitch, which is cool. You can watch people play video games better than you. Says, yes, in my guy group, this is at 716, I'm the only one who gets counseling, even though I know others have panic attacks. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I look back to my friends. I was going through horrific stuff, and I didn't really open up about my OCD and my family until I got at rock bottom. I was housebound. I had a suicide attempt and was hospitalized. It wasn't until then that my family even knew. But when I started coming out about my story with OCD and I had panic attacks and anxiety, I had so many people from high school reach out to me on social media and say, "Oh my God, I used to come home every day from school and I was having panic attacks," and we just never talked about it. And so what's sad is there's probably guys in your group that are having panic attacks and struggling, but because it isn't acceptable to like reach out to your friend and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling," we kind of keep it internal, which, as we know, makes OCD and anxiety and panic attacks worse. So one thing I empower you to do when you're ready, though, only when you're ready, is to open up to some of your friends you might suspect. You don't even have to ask them or call them on it. You could simply just say, "Look, like, this is what I'm going through. I'm experiencing these kind of panic attacks," and open up about your kind of experience. And what will often happen is your friends will see you as an ally, somebody who's going through it, somebody that gets it, and will say, "You know what? I actually go through panic attacks too. Are you getting help for it?" "Yeah, I'm going to counseling," and talk about it. And even if they don't jump on therapy right then, just hearing you talk about it and normalizing it may lead them to being a little bit more open, at least talking to a parent or a counselor about it. So I'm always happy when people that I work with, especially my younger clients in middle school and high school and college, will tell me that they opened up to friends on campus and they had some friends go and get help because of what they said. So don't forget, you all are advocates in your own right, and opening up to people in your life definitely can help. All right, so the next question, I'm trying to get my light to shine back more sometimes. All right, the next question is Alexandra says, "Preach." Thank you so much. Nikki says, at 717, my OCD started when I was very young, 7 or 8. I'm now 58 and was only diagnosed in 2007. I didn't know what was wrong with me when I had my son at 23. My contamination and checking definitely got worse at that. So Nikki, what's great about these live streams is they're actually up on both the IOCDF's Facebook and their YouTube. And I believe Chelsea's putting some of them up on Instagram. But go back and watch Liz McInville. She did a talk last Wednesday, I believe the 3rd, about perinatal OCD, and really address this issue. And I believe Liz is doing one more on that. But absolutely, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times when people have children, their OCD gets worse. And there's reasons for that. There's actually, we know some of it is just additional stress, because we even see in in partners who didn't even have the child having an increase in their OCD symptoms, which is still part of perinatal OCD because of the stress of bringing home a new baby. And sometimes the OCD morphs into, what if I'm not careful enough or I hurt my child? But the individual that has the baby, absolutely. I mean, we know that there's some kind of correlation between hormonal changes and OCD, because we've seen it when people are going through and finishing puberty. And we see that with individuals that are pregnant and go through having babies. So definitely, sorry about that. Obviously, it's horrible, but good thing is medication and ERP also can treat that. It's not unique in the sense that it needs a different type of treatment. It's just very difficult, because remember, OCD attacks the very things that matter to you the most, the things that are so important. So bringing a child into this world is one of the most incredible things someone can do. And so you're so excited about your child and you're so happy about your son. And the last thing you want is something to be hurt, or happen to him, or him to be hurt. And so OCD preys on that and knows. Fran put in the link about TMS OCD treatment, so more people can look at it, because Stacy's using the proper coil. Great. Eric says that he watches TV at bedtime, or should be reading, and going straight to bed. The silence increases anxiety and worry. Absolutely. I mean, it is difficult. I always think about this, and I don't know if all OCD specialists say this. I think I say this because I've gone through it. We can't always go right out and do the treatment 100%. Sometimes it's just too intense. So when my therapist was saying, "Hey, Chris, you need to work on not distracting yourself before bed," that sounds great on paper, but it was too hard to do that. So I started out with a sound machine. I think I started out with TV, found that the sound machine was better. And then I would read before bed till my eyes closed and fell asleep. And now, I'm much past my treatment and I'm in management and recovery. I can go to bed without any of that. So Eric has a great strategy, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be like that. You can definitely work on continuing to find different ways that work for you, and then addressing it with your therapist. Like I said, the thoughts that are racing most likely are louder, but they're probably there earlier that day. So if you can address them with a narrative or a script or an exposure, or practice acceptance and not engaging with compulsive rumination, you'll find yourself at night, those worries won't have as much of a punch. So Stacy, no relief yet. I'd give it a little bit more time. Definitely try reading the article that Fran put up, to see about how long it takes. I know, like with medication, it often TMS doesn't work overnight. So definitely make sure you try that. All right. So I'm going to butcher the name. Hiriko Rizgar at 721. And if I was wrong, please type how I was supposed to spell the name, because I'm horrific. I learned about my OCD when I was a senior back at high school, when I was studying in 2013. And I met with a dermatologist to talk about my concerns regarding exposing my skin to rain and other types of splash water. Once I was after explaining the layers of skin and immune system to me, he then referred a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed me with OCD, which was like a nightmare. Currently on ERP therapy on my own, which I recently learned about this therapy. So first of all, I am so happy that your dermatologist recognized that you should go to a psychiatrist. Here's the statistics about OCD, like I wrote in that article in the newsletter, the IOCDF quarterly newsletter. Often an individual does not go first to a OCD specialist as their first line of treatment for OCD treatment. They're often going to other doctors or their general practitioners or a counselor at school. And so the more we can get dermatologists or OBGYNs or school counselors or even coaches. I mean, anybody that we usually go to, our priests and our different pastors at our churches, if they can recognize it like your dermatologist did and had you go to a psychiatrist, look, the psychiatrist was able to diagnose you. Now I get it, and I'm sure I would love for those that are watching right now to put in the comments some words of support, because it sounds like recently getting diagnosed has been hard. So I know we've all gone through that. The diagnosis can be horrific because it's like, whoa, I have an actual disorder. I don't want this. But at the same time, at least it gives us a direction of where to go. And so you're finding ERP therapy. It is difficult to do on your own, but I will say there's a lot of good workbooks. I know there's the OCD workbook. I believe that Dr. Claiborne wrote an OCD workbook. We have the Mindfulness OCD workbook by Tom Corboy and John Hirschfield. There's the recent Kim Quinlan put out the Self Compassion workbook for OCD. So there's a lot of good workbooks for OCD. There's these live streams. There's the different content on the website of the IOCDF. So treating OCD on your own is pretty difficult, but there's a lot of resources out there. So please find the resources that help the most for you. But hang in there. I empathize as somebody that's lived through it, and I know everybody in the chat can as well. We are sad that you got diagnosed because it means you have it, and we don't wish this disorder on anyone. But we are a strong community that has each other's backs. We are here to let you know you're not alone. We're here to provide resources, education, community, and support. And through the treatment and the support that we offer here in our community, the IOCDF and the OCD community at large, will be there for you every step of the way. So hopefully that helps. Um, yeah, so Vanilla says that they were surprised that they had the fear of throwing up. So that's why it's so great to ask your questions in your comments. A lot of times, people for the first time will find out, that they have a subtype, or I didn't know that the relationship OCD was a thing. And I was really struggling with relationship OCD. It was sort of the last real compulsion I had when my OCD was terrible, because my OCD was so bad I wasn't able to date. I wasn't in a relationship. So then when I got better and went into in my first like real relationship, my OCD was terrible, and I didn't know it was OCD until there was an article about relationship OCD that was put up on the IOCDF, and it clicked for me that this was OCD. So often when we talk about subtypes or our thoughts or experiences, it can often have people recognize, like, wait a second, I have that too. Eric makes a comment at 722. Yes, misdiagnosed by two different therapists in your 30s. Once a psychiatrist said that you have OCD, and I started reading about it, your whole life came into sharper focus. So that's what I wrote about in that article as well. Do you know, on average, a non-OCD specialist, so a therapist or general doctor, 60% of the time in the studies out there show that they're going to misdiagnose us. It's going to be misdiagnosed as schizophrenia is one common one. Tourette's, because if your OCD is like tapping things evenly, or like, doing things evenly, they'll think it's Tourette's. ADHD, often people get misdiagnosed with ADHD. They get misdiagnosed with anxiety, just general anxiety disorder. Those are the common ones, sometimes bipolar disorder. So those are some of the common ones I hear. So I wonder, what are some of the things in the chat maybe everybody could put in there? Like, what are some of the things that you were misdiagnosed with until you got your proper OCD diagnosis? Unfortunately, it takes about 14 to 17 years on average for people to get treatment after starting showing the first signs. And that's why we got to keep educating general physical, like medical staff and mental health practitioners, so that people like Eric, individuals with OCD don't have the same experiences I did. I got misdiagnosed with Tourette's, schizophrenia, and Tourette's and schizophrenia and ADHD. So I got those, but a lot of people get misdiagnosed. So we want to change that, Eric, for sure. So at 723, Maria says that pure O is debilitating. So if you're not sure about the term pure O, so pure O stands for pure obsessional OCD. I would say that there's mixed reviews on the title, but basically the title means that the majority of your of your compulsions are mental. So some of the common mental compulsions is replaying. So it's like replaying an event over and over and over to try to either get the memory right or to get clarity about what happened. There's mental checking. So, did I do that? Did I do that today? Am I okay? Do I feel okay? Am I going to do anything bad? Things like that. There's rumination. So it's just kind of like thinking all day just about different obsessions. There's trying to figure things out. There's analyzing. There's a bunch of different mental compulsions that people do. And what I always tell people is that what makes mental obsessions, well, all obsessions are mental. I meant mental compulsions so debilitating, like Maria says, is because if my compulsion is hand washing, unless I'm housebound, if I'm out in the day, I can't wash my hands constantly. However, we can definitely mentally compulse. So if I left the house and I have a fear that I left on an electric appliance that's going to burn my house down, I can ruminate about that compulsively in my head and have that obsession just stick with me. I can do that all day. I can be at work, I can be out with friends, I can get no relief because I'm just replaying that all day. And I don't get the relief until I come home at night. Okay, my apartment's still okay. Things are not overheating. I'm good. So that's the problem, is that we can just do it all day. So what we have to do in those situations, let's use my example I just gave, it's coming to the decision that you are no longer going to try to get the answer. You're going to say that I'm not going to collect any new data replaying in my head. If my house is on fire, it's going to be on fire. I'm not home, I'm at work, I can't go back home. So there's no point in me trying to figure it out. I'm going to take a passive approach. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to choose not to engage, and I'm going to say that I will not find out or get information. I can't. I'm not going to get the answer in my head regardless of what I do. So I have to sit with this uncomfortable feeling and choose to engage into life, which in this case is get back to work. And when I get home, then I will have that answer to the question, but I will not have it answered until I come home tonight at 7 p.m. So anytime my brain wants me to compulse, I'm going to choose not to engage. I can't control the intrusive thoughts. That's OCD's job. But what I do with those thoughts, I have to accept their presence and choose not to do anything. And some people find it helpful to take it to worst case scenario and say, look, if my house is on fire right now, the fire department's going to put it out. Maybe it burnt most of my valuables and I'm going to have to start over and it's going to be difficult. That's a possibility. And when I get home, I'm going to find out if that's what happened, but I can't figure it out now. So really recognize that your job is to do nothing with your intrusive thoughts, because if you spend all day with them and compulsively go through them and replay them and focus on them, it's going to make it worse. All right. So I am seeing some really good comments in there, back and forth. We always love that. I'm glad that was helpful, for you, Meg. Gandex says this example is gold. I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah, Vanilla actually makes a good point at 729 Headspace app with sleep. I would say that Headspace, Calm app, some of those apps are really helpful with sleep. It provides guided meditations, deep breathing techniques. Once again, you still need to address the OCD, but while you're in that process, those things can help for sure. So help me with the pronunciation, put in the comment again, but I'm going to call you Z. You're going to have a cool nickname on when I'm doing the hosting the live streams. But Z Rizgar at 729 says, you learned about OCD when you're in high school. Yeah, so with what I always tell people is that we learn a lot of times about OCD. And we always hear more about contamination and checking. So I do know that when people's OCD doesn't fit sort of that model, that's often when people go misdiagnosed or absolutely have a period of time that they don't recognize that they have OCD. Because if you're having intrusive thoughts about God punishing you, I mean, we don't talk about that as OCD for most people until you get into the community. So that's why it's so important for people to open up and to share the different subtypes they go through if you're ready, because of the fact that you're going to open up about harm intrusive thoughts or sexual intrusive thoughts, and somebody's going to say, whoa, that's what I go through, but I've never either thought of it as OCD or never had the courage to open up about it. So that's why it's so important. Jennifer says another comment and says, you had one for your son, so sleep machine, didn't make the connection that was helping her when she started sleeping in his room. The presence and the white noise decreased behavior. So fun fact, part of the reason that white noise helps is it's meant to stimulate the same sound babies hear when they're in the stomach. So that's why it's a feeling of comfort and calm. It's because we associate that from when we were, in the 9 months in the stomach. So that's why it also, that sound is also designed to block out ambient noises. So a lot of people that can't sleep like it because it blocks out like car horns and things like that, but it also can help block out thoughts. So All right, so we have a comment at 7:32 from Sarah Stein. It says, "Does anybody else have body sensation obsessions? Like if I see an eye floater, I get super focused on it, or if I feel a tingling in my leg or my hand, I feel like I need to touch it or look at it to make sure it's okay." These are just a few examples. Sometimes I wonder if it's OCD because I've never heard about this from other people. Can also get super focused on sounds and stimuli when you're working during the day. So, Sarah, you were in the right place. Yes, this is absolutely OCD. So, the one that I had that drove me crazy before I recognized it was OCD is whenever I would notice my nose. So, like when you're looking right now, you don't really see your nose. But then if you kind of see it, like if you look down, I'm hopefully not triggering you. Actually, I should be triggering you as a therapist. So you could do ERP. But when I would notice it, I would get so stuck. Okay, I can see, but now I see my nose. And I would get so like in my head about the fact that I could now see my nose. And there was no core fear in the sense like, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt someone or die. It was just, I want to go back to the time before I noticed my nose because I was able to focus and be calm. And now that I've noticed my nose, it's so hard for me to focus. It's frustrating me. And then you kind of go in this tug of war because then it feels good to look at it and to notice it because you're kind of doing what OCD wants. But then you're trying to ignore it because you want to be able to go back to focusing on it. And what I found is both of those tug of war corners didn't work for me. It just made me more focused on the either my nose or the frustration of noticing my nose. So what worked for me, which I'm hoping would work for the other things like a tingling sensation or any of these kind of somatic obsessions, is once I noticed my nose, I was like, yep, I noticed my nose. Awesome. For the rest of the day, I'm going to notice my nose. It's going to drive me crazy. And today, my day might be 80% cool because now that I've noticed my nose, it's not going to be as cool as it once was. And I guess I'm going to go throughout the rest of the day noticing my nose. And once I kind of owned that and just accepted the fact that, hey, today's going to be obnoxious because now that I've noticed my nose, it didn't bother me as much. And anytime OCD was like, you're noticing your nose, I'm like, yep, I am. Absolutely. Sucks, but it is what it is. And when I didn't make a big deal about it and I just let go of the fact that I was frustrated that I could notice my own nose, it was just like, and it wasn't as bothersome. It's almost like when a kid's bullying you, let's say, like I got bullied about everything. I got bullied because I had a big forehead, for instance. Somebody told me that once. So if I go up to the bully and I say, hey, my name's Chris, I have a huge forehead, I'm taking away their power. They can't affect me. And that's what we want to do with OCD. So if you get braces and you stand up in class and say, look, I got braces, I'm a brace face, or whatever it is. If a bully tries to make fun of you about braces, it doesn't hit as hard because you've already kind of made fun of yourself. You've already addressed it. So I found when I woke up and deliberately looked at my nose, or in your case, noticed an eye floater or a sensation, you're like, yep, I noticed it. It's there. All right, cool. It's going to be there with me all day. My day won't be as great, but I'm going to do my best. It is what it is. Then it just doesn't have that same power. And then when OCD is telling you your day is affected, it's like, well, it's affected, but I'm going to choose to still go and do what I have to do the rest of the day. So let me know in the chat, Sarah, if that relates to you at all. And if you notice that. I am going to throw out there Stacy's comment. I don't know what it was in address to, but health anxiety maybe. So health anxiety, I'll just address that. That's where you have the obsession that's at 7:33. The obsession that you can be sick or something's going to be harmful to your health. So often it starts when somebody is experiencing a real sensation. So maybe you're having a sore throat or you're having a bump in your throat, but individuals with OCD then catastrophize it and it is to where they think they're going to die or get sick, and they can go to multiple doctor's appointments and try to get try to get different diagnosis, and they have to get second and third opinions. So the treatment for that is really to stop checking, to stop Googling, to stop going to doctor's appointments. Alexandra says that the last one about the eye floaters, sensor motor. Yes, people call it sensor motor OCD as well. So it's definitely a subtype right there. And Eric makes a good point. OCD can focus on pretty much anything. So I always tell people that absolutely, like it can be almost about anything. All right, so I'm going to try to get through. It's crazy how quick this goes. There's only 6 minutes. So Gandek says at 7:36, I have just right OCD as my main type, and it tends to attach itself to things that aren't even bad. But OCD wants things to be perfect so I can move on. It's super ego dystonic and is stressful. Yeah, so absolutely. So just right OCD doesn't usually have like it can. but it doesn't often have this like dastardly outcome. It's where you want to do something just right. It can literally be like setting your phone down. I have to set my phone down just right, or sitting in a chair just right. Sometimes the just right is connected with numbers. So, my just right number is 6 times. I have to sit down 6 times. If that doesn't feel good, I have to go do it to 12 and to 18 and 24. Other times it's more of a feeling. You can't quite place what makes something feel just right. It's just you sit down and it's like, well, this doesn't feel just right yet. So I have to keep sitting down till it happens. What we have to do in that case is if you can sabotage the OCD deliberately, so sit down 4 times or sit down in a way that's not just right, that helps. Or what you can do is when you sit down, if OCD says that it's not right or it's not perfect, it's sitting down and just moving forward anyways. And when OCD tells you, but Gandak, you're going to be stressed out and uncomfortable, it's like, well, sorry, that's exactly what I'm going to do. It is what it is. You also say at 7:37 that an OCD podcast, shout out to Stuart, Ralph, one of my good friends. I'm on episode 201. So listen to episode 201 of OCD Stories. Painted a dollhouse a certain color and they were happy with it, but later OCD made them question, do I like this color? The reason why I wanted to bring that up is because often OCD will have us question our choices. So, why do I like chips? Why do I like this color? And then you start to analyze it more and more. And that's the problem that ends up happening is you start to analyze if I like it or not. Liking a color, a flavor, a food, those things are not about our thought process. It's more about how we feel. It can even be about, just preferences, things like that. So once you start to get in your head about, why and question it, then you sort of get out of your feelings and into your head, and then you start to question it, which just causes more confusion. So always remind yourself, the more you question things versus just let them be, the more confusion. At 7:43, the claimer asks, "Can OCD give you general anxiety disorder?" So the thing about general anxiety disorder is OCD and and anxiety disorders used to be paired in DSM-4, but in DSM-5 they separated them because OCD does create anxiety. I mean, you do have anxiety with OCD, but it's not the same as general anxiety disorder. So statistically, those of us that have OCD, about 68% are also going to have general anxiety disorder, so comorbid disorders, whereas like about 30% won't. It's not going to give you general anxiety disorder in the sense, but you can have both. So general anxiety disorder, you're going to tend to have worries, less intrusive thoughts, but worries about things that genuinely people worry about, being late to a wedding because of traffic, or having to do a presentation at school, or if your job's doing a round of layoffs, worrying that you might be laid off. And usually the anxiety starts and the worry starts as the event nears, the event happens, and then it fades. Whereas with OCD, you can be obsessing about something that happened decades ago or decades later. Eric kind of jumped in and had the kind of the same thing. Sarah says she had a therapist for a year who said that she thought she had just generalized anxiety, but realized it was OCD and specialized in OCD. So it really shows how hard it can be diagnosed. Yeah, sometimes I think that's what's my secret weapon is because I have OCD. I can always tell. I dealt with a lot of generalized anxiety. So it was definitely one of those things where I could definitely tell the difference between them. It was because general anxiety disorder, sometimes you just feel anxious for no reason, but OCD, we usually have a worry. I'm going to try to get to a couple more comments for you and don't kill me. Nikki says at 7:46, thanks, my son is 34 now. I definitely improved since I was diagnosed with OCD and with meds. I swear by ERP. I've done so much of it. It is definitely the best. Awesome, Nikki. I can tell you that all of us are rooting you on. You got this. You definitely, have a community behind you. All right. So Mario at 7:46 says, I'm from Beirut, Lebanon. I got the chance to watch you several times. Oh, thank you. I love what you do, and you're trying to help us keep up with a great job. I was just in the US, so you could be my therapist. Well, I didn't read the whole comment. That wasn't why I had it come up. I just saw Beirut, Lebanon, and was so jealous that you're somewhere cool. It sounds cool to be. Thank you so much. I mean, I can say this on behalf of all of us lead advocates. I know this is usually Ethan's spot. We meet every Tuesday. I mean, we are so dedicated to bringing you resources and and education, answering your questions, because we know how difficult it can be to find help, to find treatment, to have resources to get treatment. So anything that we can do to provide services and anything that we can to you, we want to do it. So your words mean so much to us. Thank you for the sweet words. And if you're in US and California, I would definitely be willing to um, help you out. Kelly Glover at 750, I'm almost caught up, says, is self-harm OCD really a thing? Absolutely. So here's the difference between self-harm, like suicide attempts, and self-harm OCD. Somebody that is contemplating suicide and is self-harming, they don't necessarily want to do it, but it isn't this intrusive feeling. So when I was harming myself and ended up attempting suicide, it wasn't like it felt like OCD telling me I wanted to do it. And I was like, no, leave me alone. And I was worried about doing it. I was depressed. I was housebound. I was isolated, and suicide and self-harm felt like the only escape. So that's the big difference between the two is somebody that's self-harming is doing it because they have so much emotion and frustration. It's like a release to them. They are frustrated and they just want some kind of relief from their feelings and their sensations. Whereas somebody with self-harm OCD doesn't want to harm themselves. In fact, sometimes they just love their lives and are really, really happy. But because of the intrusive worry and concern that they may harm themselves, that's what they obsess over. They ruminate. They think, well, I'm feeling a little tired today. Does that mean I'm more likely to be depressed and harm myself? So if the thoughts are something you don't want and you're trying to push them away and you're like, leave me alone, that's definitely more likely to be, OCD. All right, so I'm going to try to get to the last ones. 753 from Edith Israeli. How can very resistant OCD be treated or approached? I would say if you're dealing with very treatment resistant OCD, it's likely that you do need to be on a medication. So please talk to a psychiatrist about medication or some of the other options that are available, like TMS. I would say finding the right level of care. So you may need to go to a residential treatment program where you can be living the ERP, constantly versus just once a week therapist. So the combination of a really good OCD specialist that is really versed on the treatment at a residential level while on medication that works for you, that's the gold standard treatment. Make sure that your family and loved ones aren't giving you reassurance or enabling. Make sure that you have values and goals. That's your motivation and why to get treatment. And make sure you're part of a support group so you get encouragement for others going through it. And also make sure that you are having a support system to help you out. A couple of the people said they also have the nose thing that I had. Pauline at 756, it's been a revelation listening to me. Oh, thank you. Yes, I know how OCD ticks because sadly I have it. I hate the disorder, but it is treatable, it is manageable, and I'm so happy that there's treatment out there. So definitely do. All right, so I am going to leave it there. I wish I could go on forever, but I can't. I'm going to do one last comment because I caught up to everybody. So at 7:57, Sarah says, that is super helpful. As far as the root fear, sometimes I get nervous that I have something wrong with me health-wise. Sometimes I'm nervous there's a bug crumb on me, assuming it's contamination. Sometimes if I hear a sound, I'm nervous something spilled or broke downstairs. Sometimes bad can happen. Lots of root fears. So yeah, so Sarah, that's how OCD gets you, right? Those root fears. It tells you that something bad's going to happen, and it is your job every day to be looking out for something, finding something, and then fixing it with a compulsion. But the problem is it just reinforces the disorder. It just reinforces something's wrong. And then day by day, year by year, we commit to more and more mental and physical compulsions and never get relief. And so it's difficult to do, but it's to break that cycle. So it's starting slow and systematically on your hierarchy to step back and to do less. All right, everybody. I want to thank everyone so much. Honestly, when I came in today, I was nervous for stepping in for Ethan. I know all of you love Ethan. Ethan's an incredible human being. I came with some questions people had DM'd me just in case, but Fran reassured me that you guys were an amazing. My live stream is always during the day at 9 a.m. Western, 12 noon Eastern. So I have the morning folks, but he assured me that the night folks are energetic too. So everybody that made a comment, that supported somebody else in the chat, that asked a question, that answered any of my questions. You really made this live stream what it was today. Your willingness to be so open and to communicate and to go back and forth with me allowed us to have a fun hour and 4 minutes of all things OCD. So I really, really thank everybody. Absolutely. I really appreciate everybody that joined it. I want to make a couple quick announcements on the way out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like this and subscribe to us. Follow us on Facebook. Don't forget that if you need additional resources for OCD, definitely go to IOCDF.org. That way you can find everything on the website. There's a lot of really great things. You can also on the website go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. That way you can submit questions. You can talk about what topics you want. We're constantly trying to figure out what different topics and different things that we could do in the future. So we want to hear from you. Lastly, I just want to say thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you for your engagement. It made this such a fun hour. I appreciate it. I'm going to be back with IOCDF tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and then 12 noon Eastern for Chris's Corner. We're going to be answering more OCD questions. I have 2 guests on tomorrow, so I'd love to see you there. You can ask general questions or about the topic. Thank you so much, and don't forget that OCD is treatable. I am a living proof of that. I know you can get better. Just keep fighting hard, and you'll get on the other side. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Fran, the IOCDF, for having me. I appreciate it, and I hope to see everybody at future live streams. Take care, and thank you so much. Everybody, your comments are super, super humbling and super nice. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day. I really appreciate it. Bye.